Hi, Tara. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to Boob Camp, Chelsey Jean's amazing community, all about all the things, not just lymphatic health, but everything under the sun in terms of empowering women around their health, their options, their living the life they want to live without any limitations that have been imposed upon us all. And we're just absolutely thrilled to have you here today. My name's Emily Diamond. For anyone who hasn't met me yet, I'm Chelsey's Director of Operations here, and I also come from a clinical background and conventional medicine. So I have been to the dark side and back and all of those things. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Tara here today. We had a little change of plans this morning with Chelsey was going to be interviewing you, Tara, but now you've got me. So I get the chance to get to know you and ask you all my questions. So I'm thrilled. Thank you for doing
Fantastic.
this.
Yeah, no
And if you
problem at
wanted
all.
to kick off with telling us, I'd love to hear about how you got to meet Chelsey and how you two know each other and how this relationship came about. Because I've had the background from Chelsey about how you met and how your careers have progressed together. But yeah, tell our beautiful community all about you and how you and Chelsey crossed paths.
Yeah, so Chelsey and I crossed paths when we did mentoring. We did the same sort of, I think it was a 6-month mentoring program with the wonderful Tammy Guest, who's a naturopath and also mentors practitioners. So there was, I think, about, oh gosh, close to about 20 of us in the group, and we did ongoing mentoring, and it really up-leveled so many of us, all the women that have literally gone through her program. And we were kind of her first start of this program, have just really gone on to do amazing things in their businesses, particularly Chelsey. And yeah, so we had a real connection. We did 6 months mentoring where we were online every month. We had to do lots of lives. We had to really get out of our comfort zone. And then we ended up with a retreat in Bali where we really got to connect in face-to-face, which was amazing. And that was 10 years ago, like close to 10 years ago. And we've all kept pretty close. We've watched each other rise. We've really supported each other's growth. And I think that's really been a big part of, how successful we've all become, because we've all really cheered each other on and really lifted each other up. So it's been a really fantastic experience.
Beautiful. And you came into that program, you're a clinician, already a practitioner, already had your practice.
Yeah.
So you tell us about your practice and what it is that you do, and yeah, what your main thing is that you make an impact in. Because Chelsey was also able to tell me that you're a very high impact person. You've helped a lot of people and changed a lot of lives.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, so I'd already been a naturopath for like 20 years before I started that mentoring. So now I've got over 30 years experience as a naturopath. And just before I did that program, I was just looking about, I've been a general naturopath in the same sort of town. So I had a great sort of little practice, lots of referrals, everything was going well, but definitely was thinking about some sort of different direction to move into. And just before I started that program, I had really started to really look at thyroid health. It just came out of nowhere. I started to see lots of thyroid presentations in my clinic, and some really tricky presentations where the pathology didn't match the symptoms or the symptoms didn't match the pathology. And when I looked back at my training during my naturopathic degree, it really brushed over thyroid, very simplistically. I hadn't seen a lot of thyroid presentations in my clinic before this, and I just started to see many and many. So I really started to throw myself into research of how to support these patients. I read every book, I did every course. I was doing courses from America, Australia, everything I could extracurricularly, because I found the treatment protocols just weren't really fitting these patients either. And along the way, I also thought, well, I'm going to get my own thyroid tested, and lo and behold, it came back that I had Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid disease. And I was just blown away because I had no idea. And because there is quite a high genetic predisposition there, I also got all my 3 children tested, and my youngest of 3 also had Hashimoto's, and she was 15 at the time.
And
And
for people who
really,
don't know what Hashimoto's is, the way I describe it to people is it's autoimmune. Your body develops kind of like a misdirected, inappropriate response to attacking your own thyroid cells. So your body starts treating your thyroid gland like it's an enemy. And maybe if you could just tell us, because your clinical expertise is,
yeah.
up to the moon. So it's such a great great opportunity for us. If you could let us know what the Hashimoto's does to people, or what a thyroid dysfunction does for people, particularly women, knowing that the majority of our people are women.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thyroid can present in many, many ways. So it can present as a subclinical presentation. So we've got two arms. We've got a underactive arm and we've got an overactive arm. And what we're going to really be talking about is the underactive arm in relation to the lymphatic system, where everything sort of slows down. Also, so we can have a subclinical, meaning that it's like a state where, but we can still see things, clinical manifestations in the body. And that's where we have normal thyroid hormones, T4, T3, and then we have a high TSH, and then we can have a primary hypothyroidism, and that really reflects glandular failure, where the gland is really struggling to produce thyroid hormones. And the biggest cause, the number one cause of all hypothyroidism, is Hashimoto's, or autoimmunity, and that is when the immune system, in response to, usually it combines a genetic trigger with, or a gene expression with some sort of environmental trigger that triggers.
Yeah, like a significant trauma, a significant viral infection,
toxin, gut health, anything like that.
So
that
any shock to the system.
Something like that, yeah. And the immune system makes these antibodies. And what these antibodies do is they drive inflammation. So it's not the antibodies that actually attack the tissue. They drive inflammation and immune cell infiltration by the lymphatic system, which we're going to talk about today, into the thyroid cells, into the little thyrocytes. And that causes damage, inflammatory response within the gland. And then that can destroy some of those thyrocytes in the gland, and the gland is unable to produce its thyroid hormones. And the end stage.
So it's not as simplistic as like the way we view like the viral model of my body thinks you're an invader and it attacks you. It's this inflammatory response, like you said, via the lymphatic system, which then compromises the function of the thyroid, and the thyroid's having to fight very hard to do its job. Is that more correct?
Yeah. Yes, but things like infections and viruses can actually get into the cell as well. Toxins can get into the thyroid cell. There's many things, but the autoimmune process is, it's inflammation and immune cell infiltration into the gland, which damages the thyroid tissue and the cells, and then the gland really struggles to produce thyroid hormones. Now, combine that with nutritional deficiencies, where the thyroid doesn't have the cofactors to make thyroid hormones. Combine that with poor gut health, which can drive autoimmunity. Combine that with
lymphatic stagnation.
Yeah, it's huge. It's quite complex. Like, people, and this is when, when I learnt about it, it was so simplistic. But when you start to see really complex presentations, it just doesn't, there's so much more to thyroid physiology.
And I can imagine it's one of those kind of like a hurdle. And for those of you who are joining us live, thank you for joining us. So great to have you here with Tara Nelson, who's specifically a thyroid expert, 30 years clinical naturopath, has walked along Chelsey in the development of the greater dissemination of empowering the public with high quality information and clinical interventions. And Tara, when we're talking about thyroid health, why should our community be, obviously it's complex. Like you said, there's these subclinical issues, which for those of you who aren't clinicians, that means someone's struggling with some symptoms and some signs, but it's not yet showing up on a blood test as, oh, you're problematic, let's diagnose you. So, and that's going to be the majority of people, right? They're either dealing with, like everyone knows the concept of pre-diabetes now. America's kind of made that mainstream knowledge that people can now tell, oh, I'm about to get this disease before it gets to the point, which of course we want people aware of. We want to know before it progresses to being that bad. And with the thyroid, how will people know? Because, obviously by the time it's clinical, as you said, there's so many factors in, and then you have to really overhaul from a very multidimensional perspective how you approach someone's recovery. But how will people know if they're starting to get these subclinical signs? There's some sort of mainstream information now about how people know if they're pre-diabetic, or Chelsey's done a great job for helping educate people about how to know if your lymphatic system is congested. What things would you be feeling and experiencing? Can you give us those 101 concepts of what's an early warning sign from your thyroid gland?
Fatigue. Fatigue would be the number one thing where things start. So even in a subclinical presentation, things are sort of slowing down. The thyroid's responding to something going on in the body. So at a subclinical level, it's not a glandular issue. It's not a thyroid problem. The thyroid's compensating for something going on upstream. So usually with the symptoms that will start to sort of appear would be fatigue. So like things are starting to slow down. We could see maybe constipation. The brain starts to get a bit foggy because there's less T3 in the brain cells, fatigue, brain fog, maybe the weight shifting a little bit. You can have aching muscles, you can feel cold, you can start seeing some menstrual irregularities, but probably the top three are definitely just, why am I tired? Like if anyone's just
so it's that thing of
tired,
not feeling rested when you wake up in the morning.
yes, sleep
when you
comes into it as well.
Fatiguing quicker when you exercise, and getting that after the crash, it becomes more intense, sort of thing.
Yes, and there's definitely other things that can contribute to fatigue, such as low iron, low B12. Like there's so many things that for a differential diagnosis, but definitely fatigue. And when I was talking about the fatigue of Hashimoto's or a primary thyroid condition, it's exhaustion. It's exhaustion where you could put your head down, and you sleep. Like you need a nap. If you could have a nap, it's not just fatigue. It's not just tiredness. It is exhaustion. And when I start working with women, they'll come back in 6 weeks and say, "Oh yeah, I'm still tired, but I'm not exhausted anymore," which is a really great sign that we're starting to, improve that thyroid hormone metabolism in their body. So fatigue, starting to feel a bit foggy in the brain. Perhaps that weight, is a bit starting to sort of pile up, or you just can't shift it. Aching muscles, feeling the cold, dry skin, the hair could feel a bit brittle, or it could be hair loss.
The brittleness and the thinning.
Yeah, yep.
Is that also nail brittleness and thinning? Does that also?
Yep, that can happen as well. Yeah, more of an end.
So everything kind of just. I used to joke about how we get this kind of metabolic kind of gear shift at 25, where it feels like, oh, I couldn't go out and miss out on sleep or push yourself as far as you could before. There seems like more of a recovery period, or more of a sort of a price to pay and a bounce back. And then obviously there's different stages in our life where that occurs. So it sounds like what most women could probably dismiss as like the mid-30s, mid-40s, mid-50s sort of gear shifts that we get hormonally, or for having, busy careers or having families, all the things that are energy, our energy goes to. It sounds like a lot of people could be dismissing their fatigue and also exhaustion because they'll have a lifestyle that justifies that they should be tired.
Well, I was diagnosed with quite a primary, like my TSH was about 8, my T4 was 9. My T3 was very low. I had 3 small kids, I ran a business. I was just really busy. And I thought that my fatigue was just normal. That was just part of being a busy mum and a busy, mum doing all of the things. And I had a really rampant Hashimoto's going on. And it really did.
Those numbers that you just said are reflective of Hashimoto's for people who don't know?
100%. Yes.
Okay.
I think women are quite resilient, we just get on with it. We just assume that is a normal way we operate because we're busy. Women are busy. We're busier in sort of time than we ever are. We do all of the things. We're multitaskers, and that is part of why women are more prone to thyroid conditions, because we are the busier, we're the multitaskers. Another reason is because of our hormonal fluctuations throughout our lifetime. So from puberty all through our reproductive years, our menstrual cycle, during our fertility, our pregnancy, postpartum, and then perimenopause and menopause are huge hormonal shifts for women. And any time, or all of those key hormonal stages require optimal thyroid hormones. There's a very direct relationship between all of our sex hormones and thyroid hormones because it's all part of the endocrine system.
Yeah. And it's all like a concerto, right? It's a concert. It's an orchestra.
Yeah. And all of those times can put a lot of big pressure on the thyroid to function well. And if you don't have enough thyroid hormones in any of those stages, we can see a lot of problems happen, and particularly puberty, particularly pregnancy, and particularly particularly perimenopause. So they're key times when the thyroid is put under huge amounts of stress, and we can see thyroid conditions developing. We can see autoimmune conditions developing. The other reasons why women are more prone is that we do put a plethora of toxic chemicals on our body. So the thyroid is an environmental sensing gland. It can chemicals can get into our gland. A lot of those chemicals are exposed to through our personal care products, through makeup.
Yeah, I like to think about how glands are sort of like sponges. You know, when people push their glands, there is a spongy effect of them, right? They are absorbers. They're absorbing and filtering and collecting, right?
Yes, the thyroid has something called it's the way that it pushes iodine into its cells. It's the sodium iodine transporter system can actually, that's how the chemicals and viruses and things get in there
Which
as well.
fluoride competes for, I think, is that correct?
Fluoride, bromide, what's the other one? Chlorine. Yeah, same sort of.
So everyone needs a water filter. Everyone needs a whole house filter, or at least a filter on their shower head and on their drinking water tap, and the water they brush their teeth with. Lots of people forget that the water they're brushing their teeth with needs to also be filtered. Yep.
Yeah. So there's lots of reasons why women are more prone to have a thyroid condition, and autoimmunity, where we're like sort of 9 times more likely to develop a thyroid condition, autoimmunity than men.
Yeah, and men are working on a 24-hour clock, right, with their endocrine health, their glandular orchestra, whereas women, that all those factors that you talked about of puberty, and then, of course, people who have endocrinological issues like PCOS has now been appropriately reclassified as the polyendocrinolic disorder. So it's all more about a multi-system disorder, and that it's driven by your endocrine system, which is very tied to lymphatic system for our community who's so interested in lymphatics. All of these things are women, and then it's fertility, and then it's pregnancy, and then it's perimenopause, and then it's postmenopause or surgical menopause or medication that affects it, or they take contraceptive medication, or they take menopause hormonal therapy, or they take what used to be HRT. So for women, it's kind of like never really, it's always a moving target, right? For men, there's this dartboard of I can just aim at the bullseye and I know what optimal energy feels like in a 24-hour cycle, because they've got the same testing landscape every single day. Whereas women, the target's constantly moving, right? Because, well, what is it? Is it because I'm really busy? Is it because I'm premenstrual? Is it because I'm on my period? Is it because I'm ovulating? Is it because of this? Am I starting perimenopause? Am I low iron? All these things that women are dealing with as such much more complex factors. I think it's really hard for women to know what is normal, and then we get used to and adjust to being exhausted, don't we?
That's right. And then through a subclinical or primary or autoimmune, we've also got an overactive arm, hypothyroidism and Graves' disease, and they can do the same thing, but in a different sort of physiological pathway. But so thyroid is really important during all of those hormonal life cycles. And if we have too much or too little, or an autoimmune aspect driving more inflammation, then it can really affect those key hormonal life stages that we go through.
Okay. And when you're creating awareness around thyroid health, do you have some sort of big hitter headlines that you tell people, like how many people are, subclinical in their experience of that? I mean, I can imagine that it's not incredibly well funded or researched, because, the easiest thing for doctors to do is, do the little thing. Lots of people might have seen someone with that little scar on their neck where a thyroid's been removed. That's a very, you'd be surprised at, like, it is surprising once you notice it, how many people have had thyroid interventions. But how many people do you think, or is there evidence of how many women are dealing with subclinical thyroid?
I think the stats around subclinical are up to about 5%. So in the sort of general population, which sounds a little low, but it's actually quite high.
That's 1 in 2 people. That's huge.
And I think that is really underrated, because to pick up a subclinical, we're going around, well, most people are just having their TSH tested. They're not having their thyroid hormones. So TSH comes from the pituitary gland and is a responding marker. It is not the whole picture. And when we look at the medical algorithm, doctors are taught to just test TSH. And if TSH is in range, or it's a little bit low, or it's a little bit high, it's a little bit of a watch and wait. Come back in 3 months and we'll maybe test, and if it's still the same or it's got worse,
but
they might
it's
test
kind
the
of like
T4 and the
by then it's
T3, and
too
then
late,
they might
right?
wait for a little while, and then antibodies never get tested. So many patients, when I see them, they've never had their antibodies tested. They've possibly been even given thyroxine, and I'm saying, well, let's rule out Hashimoto's, because that's the number one cause of hypothyroidism. Is Hashimoto's, the autoimmune thyroid condition. They've never had their antibodies tested, because in the medical sort of profession, there's no pill or tablet they can give or medication they can give for autoimmunity. Not yet. I know they're working on something in Graves' disease. I just was reading some research the other day. So many people are walking around with this inflammatory disorder, this immune-driven disorder, and they're just given a pill to increase their T4 because their thyroid's struggling to increase their thyroid hormones.
And can I just ask, how you said it's a signaling hormone? I think that's really important, right? Because the pituitary as a sort of as the traffic lights in a lot of ways, I think about the pituitary
and the hypothalamus. So it starts at the hypothalamus, releasing TRH. So people always forget about the hypothalamus, but thyroid
and that HPA axis
at the hypothalamus, the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis. So the hypothalamus will actually receive signals from the serum levels of thyroid hormones. So if there's low thyroid hormones, more thyroid hormones needed, the hypothalamus releases something called TRH, so a trophin releasing hormone, and that goes down to the anterior pituitary to tell it, okay, the thyroid gland needs a bit of stimulation here. So it's the anterior pituitary sends down TSH.
So the pituitary says, hey, buddy, you're being
stimulates the thyroid gland, and then the thyroid will go, okay, let's release out thyroid hormones into the bloodstream. And then those thyroid hormones will go around to target cells, get into the cell. There's so many issues in that whole system that I just spoke about, from the hypothalamus, pituitary release, the actual thyroid making, storing, releasing thyroid hormones, the way thyroid hormones travel around in the bloodstreams to target cells. So many things can affect that. But ideally, the thyroid hormones will get into the cell. And let's keep in mind that the thyroid produces mostly T4, which is inactive. So the thyroid produces around 90% of T4, which is thyroxine, very similar to the medication that people are given, and it's a pro-hormone. It doesn't do anything. TSH and T4 do not have a physiological effect in the body, really, as far as giving a physiological action. That T4 has to actually cross over to the cells, which require all our cells to be really healthy. And also keep in mind that every single cell in the body requires thyroid hormones, particularly T3, to activate its metabolic rate, to stimulate lymphatic flow. So when that T4 crosses over to the cell, it actually gets converted by deiodinase enzymes into T3, and that T3, which the thyroid only produces around 10% of, actually gives every single cell in the body, whether it's a kidney cell, heart cell, lung cell, whatever cell, its metabolic rate to actually have a function in the body.
And that's where the spark is. So
that's where the spark
else is like signals and instructions. It's once we cross into our cell, the conversion occurs if our cell is healthy.
If you've got enough selenium, those deiodinase enzymes are selenium dependent. So not to say to everyone to go out and take bucket loads of selenium, please don't. But there's so many, we need iodine to make thyroid hormones. We need tyrosine. So iodine combines with tyrosine. There is a step called TPO enzyme, which does an oxidation process, which creates our pro-hormones. That requires iron. If you are iron deplete or deficient, you cannot make thyroid hormones. So we need iodine, tyrosine.
This sounds like if you were looking at the stars in the Milky Way, it sounds like this is the galaxy of stars that makes up female exhaustion, Tara.
Oh, look, 100%. There's so many little steps in here, and people just go, they'll go to their doctor and they'll say, you've got a high TSH, and perhaps if you're lucky, they might test your T4. Oh, your T4's low. Put you on thyroxine. Come back in a year and we'll test you again, and that is it. Yeah. It's so simplistic, whereas it's not a simplistic process.
If our listeners can understand that this is a huge series of dominoes, and by the time that your TSH is high, it's because something's happening where whatever the end step is, we're not converting our T4 into T3 inside the cell, which has lots of factors, as you mentioned, in terms of cellular health, cellular toxicity, the cell membrane being able to correctly receive the right minerals, amino acids, all the different signals. So it's just so many dominoes, and not to overwhelm people, but we want to take it from the simplistic view of your T4 is high because something's struggling. The answer isn't take more T3 hormone.
Well, T4 will only be given if your T4 is low. So if your T4 is high, that will indicate hyperthyroidism, which is the overactive arm. And that's a whole other story.
Good. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Awesome. So that whole thing of it's not as simplistic as if the T4 is high or low, take the responding Band-Aid medication. It's we need to explore this system.
Yeah.
We need to
and some
explore
people need that,
cellular
like
health,
some people do
lymphatic health.
need it, but I see so many patients in my clinic that can't absorb the thyroid medication or they can't convert. So one of the other big processes in
Well, I was
thyroid
thinking a lot of people that would fail, right? Because if it's inside the cell, then doesn't that kind of...
Well, if you're taking thyroxine, it's inactive. So it's not doing anything. It's a pro-hormone. Thyroxine, levothyroxine, synthyroid, whatever thyroxine you are on, it is a pro-hormone.
And when you say pro-hormone, people don't know. We'll just make sure people understand what that means. Pro-hormone means it is like a catalyst or an activator, or it's sending a signal as opposed to doing something itself. Is that what you mean?
It's basically the substrate. It's the raw material, but your body, your cells doesn't use T4. So that thyroxine that you're taking, your cell actually can't use. Again, that thyroxine has to cross into the cell and be converted within the cell. And one of the really, really common presentation I see in many of my thyroid patients is poor conversion of T4 to T3. It's a classic. I see patients on very high doses of thyroxine, but still their T3 is really low, and they need a really high dose to feel good. And that is a classic poor conversion sign. And also we can test something called reverse T3. And that means a lot of that thyroxine they're taking, or a lot of their T4 they're making, is going off to reverse T3. And reverse T3 is a metabolic break in the body. That's going to slow everything down even more. If you are doing all those lymphatic drainage things that that Boob Camp teaches you, that Chelsey teaches you, you're still puffy, which is a sign of lymphatic congestion. A sign of poor thyroid hormones is that puffiness, particularly around the face, that non-pitting edema. That is a really good sign that you're not converting, or you have hypothyroidism, or even a subclinical hypothyroidism.
Oh, that's so important. Okay, so how would someone know when they press their face? Because, we get used to how we are day to day, and often these things can be a bit of a slow decline, right? Into, well, I just am this way and my mum looked like that, so I will look like that, or whatever that is. How would someone look at their face and know if they've got normal kind of tissue bounce back compared to if it's lymphatic pitting? What would be the texture or the sensation? Obviously, we're wanting to have people aware of, well, should I be talking to someone like Tara? Do I need to be going and looking at this?
Well, non-pitting edema is a very classic sign of hypothyroidism, and particularly something called mixed edema, which is a really, really mismanaged, undiagnosed, poorly controlled hypothyroidism, where it's a really, really dangerous condition with very, very low thyroid hormones. And non-pitting edema is when you're pressing that skin and there's not that little dot. So, you can see that how there's a small indent and it pops back. See how it pops back?
And that's what you mean by non-pitting. When you press it,
so a non-pitting would mean I would look very puffy. So women always come in and say my face. It can be the hands and the legs and the feet, but mostly the pre-orbital tissues, pro-orbital tissues. And when they press in, there's no indent. It just doesn't. It's like the tissue becomes very spongy, and that is like a buildup of that stagnant link in interstitial tissues. It's from low thyroid hormones and poor circulation. And that is really, so when we do...
If our Boob Camp people are pressing their face right now and they can see that it doesn't press in, they don't get the indent, then
it's a very slight indent, and you can feel it's very hard. You're pushing in and it's quite congested tissue, quite hard congested tissue. So non-pitting edema is a really it's a common sign of like poor circulation, because in low thyroid hormones, hypothyroidism, so that low T4 and T3 in the body, everything slows down. The brain slows down, the gut flow slows down, the lymph slows down, the kidneys slow down, the liver slows down. It's every cell. So the thyroid hormones get into the cell to increase the metabolic rate. It drives mitochondrial energy in the cells, helping it for that organ system to work well. It gives the organ system energy. And when we have really low thyroid hormones, particularly T3, because that is the active thyroid hormone, everything slows down. So that's when we get all those symptoms, that non-pitting edema, the puffiness, the aching muscles, the tiredness, the brain fog, the poor sleep. It all sort of is. And
like you said, slower down digestion, constipation, all of those things, changes in the bowel movements.
So you've got
and
those
then
symptoms.
On the other end of the scale, it's, you know, there's this thing around the overactive thyroid,
Mhm.
right? So that's then people who have trouble maintaining muscle mass, people who are getting that, you know, their eyes start
The,
to,
the,
their
the
eye color starts
ophthalmolgic
to,
symptoms are not, I mean, we learn about that. I'm sure I learned about that. I see a lot of people with hyper and Graves. That's actually something that I really like to specialize in and treat,
okay.
because there's not a lot of awareness out there, and it's really poorly managed in the medical system. It really is. And there's not, especially Graves' disease. So we're talking about hypothyroidism, where's low thyroid
Low
hormone.
and low. Mm-hmm.
In hyperthyroidism, we have high thyroid hormone. So we're seeing high levels of T4 and T3, and that really increases the metabolic rate of every cell in the body. So we're seeing symptoms like loose stools. We're seeing increased heart rate. It really attacks the cardiovascular system and drives, blood pressure up. We can see tachycardia,
So could
fibrillation.
people mistake that for anxiety or
Oh,
IBS?
anxiety is a symptom of
Okay.
hypothyroidism.
Yep.
Anyone with palpitations, anxiety, I'm always checking their thyroid just to rule that out, make sure it's not hyperthyroidism. And just like, so it's almost like when I'm seeing someone with really high thyroid hormones and hypothyroidism, it's like they're in the physiologically sitting in front of me. It's like they're running a 20K marathon. They're sweating, they've got high heart rates, their digestive system's going full throttle. They can be anxious. It's just everything's going too fast, and it's quite a dangerous one. So we think of hypo and Hashimoto as being quite a chronic, long-term, takes a long time to sort of get to that sort of endpoint. Hyperthyroidism and Graves' disease is very acute. It's really acute and needs to be sort of, treated really fast to sort of stop those. I mean, we can also see bone loss as well because of that high metabolic rate going. We break down bone, we muscle wasting, like you mentioned as well. So it's something we really need to get onto.
Is that something that people have as a dramatic change? You know, the hypo is the low and the slow. And so people gradually are like, oh, I am, feel completely like I can never get off the couch and everything's puffy and,
Yeah.
hard to
Yes.
move and stuff.
Yeah.
With the hyperthyroidism, the Graves' disease style presentation, is that something that happens more quickly where someone experiences, oh, suddenly I'm very different? Or is that something that they can also have as a gradual change?
It's a bit of both, but generally, if there's like Graves, it's a different antibody. So it's something called, instead of the TPO antibodies that drives Hashimoto's, we've got something called the TSI, the TSH stimulating immunoglobulin antibody, and that actually attacks the little TSH receptor on all the little thyroid cells, causing the cells to overproduce thyroid hormones. So it can be an acute Graves presentation. It'll be like one day, oh, my heart rate's going really fast, and they'll be exercise intolerant, or they're sweating a bit more, or they find they've got insomnia, or they're a bit anxious.
Oh, this sounds like a million people talking about their perimenopause as well.
And
Like waking up at
perimenopause,
3 in the morning and their heart's pounding and they're like,
yeah,
I'm sweating
yep.
and yeah.
Perimenopause is a real, time where the thyroid is really become dysregulated. Or if you go into perimenopause with poor adrenal function or lots of stress and an uncontrolled thyroid condition, it usually gets worse in that time. But yeah, so Graves and Hash's hypothyroidism, is something that we want to get onto straight away because of that high heart rate. We see TSH really suppressed, and that can, affect the bones. It can affect, so many things. So it's something we have to jump onto pretty quickly.
Thank you so much. And again, is that a similar section of our community where we go, oh, it's probably less than 10%, but then there's all these people who are already at the beginning of that journey of some thyroid, like you said, the hypothalamus, pituitary thyroid, that whole axis, that whole concert where everything works together. Are there lots of people who are just living with these, early warning signs?
Possibly. I think because, we can have subclinical hyperthyroidism as well, where there's just those sort of like gentle things every now and again, like, a bit of a flare up of anxiety or perhaps some slight heart flutters every now and again. So it can be sort of quite, minimal symptoms, but still there. But when someone is presenting with a really high thyroid hormones, then they know that something's wrong, and they generally will it's not something you can live with because it's quite debilitating. You'll have the fatigue as well, but you are getting those, really quite drastic heart palpitations and heart symptoms, which usually will drive someone to get tested or drive them to the emergency at first. They'll go, I thought I was having a heart attack or something was wrong. So they go to emergency and they do a full thyroid panel and it's like, oh, you've got Graves' disease. Yeah.
Wow.
So
Okay, because it feels so acute, like you said, like it's a full-on incident.
yes.
I'm gonna start going to our community. I've got our little live
Sure,
stream
yes.
happening
That's
here,
great.
and we've already had some people say that they're wanting to talk to you and
Sure.
start to open it up to everyone. Thank you so much for being patient with me and answering my questions and helping me
Oh,
get it
no problem at
into
all.
into a way that I'm able to understand it as well. And while I'm getting that ready, would you mind just sharing with us a little bit about your practice, the type of people that you work with, and um, yeah, even if you're able to share some instances, of course, without disclosing anyone's information, but the type of journey people go on with their thyroid healing process with you, if you're
Yeah.
happy to share, like, oh, this person, and we worked, so helping people understand the time it takes to, come back into
Yeah.
the right kind of balance. I shouldn't be using that term, but
Yeah.
to rebuild their foundation of
Sure.
endocrine health.
I just wonder if before I go there, Emily, could we just talk a
Yeah.
little bit about testing? Because we're talking all about this.
Love
Maybe
that.
we'll
Yes.
start
Well,
with
yeah, I guess that's part of people's journey with you. So I'd
yes,
love to start
yes.
there. Yeah.
Many people come and say, I think I've got all these symptoms, Tara. I've watched something you've done, and how do I actually find out? So we'll always go and do a full thyroid panel. So we cannot, like we've talked about, TSH is it gives us one part of the information, one part of the story, but it is not the whole part. So you are just getting, if you come in all of that, you're identifying with those symptoms and all you've had tested is your TSH, then that is really not, telling you
Alarm
anything.
bells.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we
Yep.
want the
Okay.
TSH for sure. We want the thyroid hormones, free T4 and free T3. They're the two ones, particularly T3, that I focus on. TSH can change. It can be affected by the season, your age, if you are sick, if you've had sex the night before, or if you had coffee before you test. It can be different if you test in the morning and the afternoon. So we always suggest that
So
every
you want
test
a full
have,
panel, right? The thyroid
yeah.
panel.
We
They
stick
they
with,
come to a clinician like you with
yes.
that pathology already done, or you are the person who orders the pathology?
Usually I'm getting them, referring them back to their GP, or we do our own private testing, depending on, their supportive GP. So we want TSH, we want the thyroid hormones, T4, T3, and we want the antibodies. So the antibodies would be TPO antibodies, thyroglobulin antibodies, and I do like to test TRAB and TSI. So I like the full gauntlet because people can actually have Hashimoto's and Graves' disease at the same time. So no one can actually present with hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism at the same time, but underneath the surface, they can have both antibodies and they can flip between the two. I see so many women that have flipped into Graves and they had underlying TPO antibodies quite high that they didn't even know about. So when we actually put them into Graves remission, they'll go back to having Hashimoto's. So it's really important. It's going to be pretty hard to probably get your GP to understand that and get all the antibodies, but the full thyroid panel is really important. And another one is a thyroid ultrasound. So if you've had Graves or you've had Hashimoto's for many years and you've never had a thyroid ultrasound, the thyroid ultrasound gives me so much information about the health of your tissue, your thyroid tissue parenchyma. So what actually is that tissue viable and can make thyroid hormones? Or are we kind of, beating a dead horse? Because some people can have over time quite fibrotic or necrotic tissue that just doesn't work. So they're going to really
So fibrotic for people who are non-clinical means that it's become sort of toughened and scarred, and then necrotic means it's actually begun to die.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So they can't produce thyroid hormones, and so that's another one. Thyroid ultrasound is really important. Yeah. So basically, when someone comes to see me, we're getting the full testing. We're working out how they're presenting, and it's either subclinical or primary or an autoimmune. And we put you on a bit of a program. I also run a 12-week thyroid program for any type of thyroid condition. So I see hyper, Hashimoto's, Graves. I see thyroid nodules. I support patients post-thyroidectomy from, they've had their thyroid taken out. Cases of thyroiditis, either postpartum or viral. So any type of thyroid. I've also got other naturopaths that work in my team as well. We've all got thyroid experience, and we get you on a targeted plan to support whatever is going on. And we're also addressing those root causes, because it's not just the thyroid we're treating. The thyroid, being that homeostatic little gland, is often responding to the poor gut health, the stress, the poor sleep, the toxins, the infections. So we're actually doing full evaluation to find out what it is that, we need to do to support your whole body to settle down your thyroid.
Yeah, because from what you explained, there's all of these levels around your cellular health, your immune health, your lymphatic health. This is, you're a whole person, and this sounds like a canary in the coal mine. Your thyroid symptoms sound like canary in the coal mine for a lot of other issues that people deal with.
That's right. Yeah, it is. It is. And, I educate practitioners and run a 6-month practitioner training program as well. And I'm always talking about, doesn't matter what condition you are treating with your patients, whether it's a kidney issue, a lung issue, cardiovascular, gut, because every single cell in the body, every organ system requires active thyroid hormones. Every single cell in your body, hair cell, gut cell, tissue, whatever it is, requires optimal thyroid hormones to activate its metabolic rate. Whatever you're dealing with, make sure that you do that full thyroid panel to rule out if their thyroid is not optimal or affecting that system even more. So it's really, really important.
Wow. So knowing that thyroid function affects every cell in your body, it sounds like it's it's a symptom that shows up once a lot of those dominoes have already begun to fall.
Yeah.
That means that a specialized clinician like yourself and your team, whether they're seeing you on a personalized program or you're doing a group program, it sounds like if you're looking for a thyroid expert, you would definitely want to be talking to Tara and her team. Or as Tara mentioned, she trains practitioners, so practitioners who have at least done some advanced work beyond their standard naturopathic qualification. They've done some thyroid specialist training to be able to have the confidence that who you're going to sees the whole picture, sees that whole domino line.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. That helps so much of understanding the full picture of it. Okay, now tell us and what matters for when people are looking for their help as well. So if someone's GP has maybe tested their T4 and said what you said before, which was so kind of familiar to so many people, which is, let's just wait and see. We'll come back and we'll come back in a little while and see. Yes. If that has happened, what do you suggest to those people from now? How do they sort of take this into their own hands? Because so many women have the knowing. They've got the knowing something's not right, something's not right, something's not right. What do you recommend? That maybe the GP hasn't even tested their T4.
Yeah. Then, just go and see another GP. If you're not getting support from that GP, if you keep getting dismissed, if you keep getting told all the time, you're fine. And I've heard that, gosh, so many times over the years of women that's just been dismissed about their symptoms and their health and just not getting the support they need. Find another doctor that can support you, or go and find like you said, a qualified naturopath or nutritionist or someone with that thyroid expertise or knowledge, so they can do the full thyroid testing for you and get you the right help you need. But don't give up, don't get disillusioned, and never give up, and keep fighting for your health. And sometimes we have to advocate for ourselves and really advocate for the testing that we really need to find out why. Because I've had patients in my clinic that have struggled for years and years and years and just been dismissed, because when a patient is diagnosed with hypothyroidism and put on thyroxine or an LT4 monotherapy for years, basically the doctor's just looking at their TSH and T4. And if your TSH and T4 are in range, there's really nothing that they can do. Because if they you're still feeling fatigued, they might put your thyroxine up, but that's going to drive down TSH, and they don't want that. But what I talked about before is that conversion issue. So you can take all the thyroxine in the world, but if you cannot convert, the biggest blocks to the active T3 that your cells use, if you have a great T4, normal TSH, still have symptoms, look, you need to get T3 tested 100% and maybe reverse T3. The biggest blocks to poor that conversion are things like selenium, zinc, and iron. Also, they're nutrients I look at. You need to look towards the liver, because 60% of all T4 to T3 conversion happens in the liver. around 20% in the gut. So if your gut's inflamed, if you've got constipation, dysbiosis, gas, bloating, you won't be converting very well. Kidney dysfunction, so looking on a blood test at EGFR, which is quite common, low EGFR. Also, not eating enough. Low calorie diets, low carbohydrate diets, fasting. So when you are not converting and a lot of your T4 is going off to reverse T3, which is a normal metabolic function, it's a danger
that's a built-in mechanism to help you for certain circumstances, right? Yeah.
Yes, but it's also a danger signal. So if you have a car accident and you're bleeding out in the road, you don't want to be digesting. You don't want to be metabolically active, right? Your body will slow everything down.
I'm not repairing my bicep that I just worked out yesterday. I'm like, get my heart and brain blood supply, please.
100%, right? Yeah. So that we will see a very high reverse T3 in those instances. Fasting, low calories, not eating enough.
Extreme exercise with insufficient nutrition, insufficient sleep.
Is another one. Yes. Yeah. Exercising too much. I see these women low carb, belting their bodies at the gym, not enough, good calories, and they have poor conversion and a high reverse T3. It's like the body's
which is great that you talked about the car accident, right? Because it's like we've so normalized those concepts which were based on research of men, but these things, are actively, these are significant stressful events for our body. And if you're already under a certain stress burden, which the majority of us are just by living in a modern environment, then, you add over-exercising, any sort of restriction in your access to nutrition, any reduction in your
carbohydrate. Our T3 is carbohydrate dependent. It needs carbs. And I like plant carbs, sweet potato, pumpkin, carrot are great. Maybe some quinoa, maybe some buckwheat, some gluten-free grains. We don't all have to be gluten-free at all, but
some close to, I think by what you're saying for everyone to pay attention to is, try to get something that's close to its source as it comes out of the ground, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, rather than gone through a process. We're talking about get back to simple foods that are simple body. Our bodies are so sophisticated, but it's actually quite simple, right? It requires these. Whereas, a simple function in terms of where all these biological functions, we require simple biological inputs, these whole foods, and any additional stress and strain you're putting on your body, it's kind of pushing you over into that world of, well, it's like I just had a car crash because I'm now having to go into fight, flight, or I'm now having to control a full-on inflammatory response, which should typically only be there for having an accident or an illness exposure. We are in these very sensitive, already very highly loaded systems now in the world we live in.
Cortisol, the next sort of thing I'd be looking at when I'm seeing that poor conversion is cortisol. And we're not talking just about stress and trauma, some really awful events. We're talking about just women being busy, busy, busy all the time and never resting. That 24/7 hamster on the wheel, feeling overwhelmed, just rushing, busy women's rushing syndrome can definitely keep that cortisol high, and that can block that conversion. 100%. I see it all the time. It's probably the number one. When I'm seeing a really poor conversion of T4 to T3. They're all stressed, busy. Yeah. Then there can be some, definitely trauma we need to look at from the past, but generally it is just like, let's get off this hamster wheel, take some time out for you, slow down and rest.
Yeah, a pedicure or a facial is not going to do that. Yep.
No. It helps. Look, I'm not against
it. It's all good, but it's not the it's what is it? Icing on the mud pie. Okay, we've got to get into the mud.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, awesome. All right. So yes, to our beautiful people on live, let's have a look at what kind of questions you have for Tara. And while we have questions coming in, if you'd be
I've got about 5 minutes before I have to jump into
my 3 minutes, right? Is that right?
Yes. I've got
great.
Something at 9 o'clock. Yeah.
Fab. So if I don't have any active questions yet, and I'm sure you're going to get a ton on the replay because, this is the during business hours, we get all the comments are going to be hitting you tonight. So we'll make sure you're tagged.
Okay. Yeah, I can jump on and have a look at those for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. And for everyone's awareness, Tara is one of our boot camp experts. So she is here in boot camp. She knows what your questions are. She knows who you are. She knows what you're interested in. And she's very familiar with the education that Chelsey and our community of PPP practitioners has been providing to you in boob camp. So in the last couple of minutes, I'd love if you could share an example of one of your people that you've got, one of your feel-good stories. We'd love to hear that.
Oh, let me think. Gosh, where do I even start? Yes. Okay. Well, let me just talk about, okay, then this is a bit of an extreme case, but a patient I was working with, she is a 63-year-old female and a mother of 10. Okay. So 10 children. Yeah. It's a bit of an extreme one. And I just I'm running my 6-month program, and we did this, the hypothyroid underactive module last night. So she was one of my cases, just to bring to mind. I've got hundreds, but she was never looked after herself, obviously very busy. They were all grown up. She was looking after grandkids, kids. She loved, she'd travel a lot in a caravan. So every time we put her on a bit of a plan, she'd be falling off the wagon. She'd go up and live with her daughter for a while, for 6 weeks, to look after the babies, fall off the wagon, love sugar. She just, she just wasn't consistent when we put her on a plan. She had hypothyroidism, so no Hashimoto's, but she had low levels of T4, slightly high TSH. She also had high inflammation levels. I was seeing her for 6 months on and off. She was a bit all over the place. And then she came to me with some blood results, and her TSH was 11. Her T4, T3 were very low. Her insulin was high. So all her blood sugars was high. Her CRP, all her inflammation was high, and her cholesterol was high. So a common thing we see with hypothyroidism is high cholesterol, because that low T3 will slow down the liver, slow down the bile, and build up of cholesterol happens. And she came in and said, Tara, help me. I'm ready to make some changes because my doctor wants to put me on thyroxine and statins for my cholesterol. And she said, and I don't want to. So she joined my 12-week program, and I'm so proud of her. She was consistent. She loved sugar. Her vice was sugar. She could never really break that sugar habit, but she did the 12-week program where we do go gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, alcohol-free. I allow a little bit of caffeine, like 1 coffee a day, but we're generally really consistent. And the 12 weeks, we also put her on some core treatment protocols, of course. We're going to put her on making sure we've got all her nutrients up. We're giving her thyroid cofactors. I'm a herbalist, so I work with herbs. We gave her a bottle of herbs to help her thyroid function and address all her root drivers and causes and triggers, being inflammation, high insulin, so insulin resistance. And after 12 weeks, her TSH had gone from 11.4 to 1.74. Her T4 had only gone from, I think, 9 to 10, but her T3 had gone from like 3.7 to 4.5. So a really big increase. She no longer needed to go on thyroxine, and her cholesterol had gone from like 8.7 to like 6.4. Still some work to do. Insulin was still a bit high. Inflammation, because her CRP had gone from like 4.5.
I was going to say, though, it sounds like a whole bunch of things.
Oh, I remember getting her results. She emailed them to me, and I rang her straight away and said, oh my goodness. And that's what consistency can do. That's what guidance, rather than doing it all alone and not having anyone to support you. And the VIP program is a community. So we're like Chelsey's community. We have a community of practitioners and people in there, like-minded people that are really all working for the same goal. And I was just so proud of her results. She just really, from 3 months of being consistent, which is often hard for people. And I put my own Hashimoto's into remission by doing the autoimmune paleo protocol for 4 months. That helped me do that, but I don't kind of suggest that too much anymore. I'm more of it's a very restrictive diet, but it helped me at the time. But it's all about consistency. Sometimes when we really need to make a change, we do need to be consistent. So
is that you don't recommend it because it was hard, it's restrictive?
It's
so
hard,
it's
very restrictive.
Consistent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes I do, but I reserve that for my patients that have maybe 2, 3, 4 autoimmune conditions. It can be amazing, but it is really, really restrictive, and it's hard. And I like to try
things. It sounds like your focus is being realistic, being consistent, being supportive, putting people in an environment where they've got every factor to help them succeed.
That's right.
And it's a place to land when things are tough.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Because, life happens. Things come in. We can't control how life happens. But if you've got that support to pick yourself up, brush yourself off and get back on track, then that's what it's all about.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us. And we've got amazing comments from our community on the page about your knowledge, and it's been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing with us things around how the lymphatic system and the thyroid system work together, and using their gloves. And so we'll, of course, reply and say at the start, you did a bunch of sharing about the connection between lymphatic function and thyroid function, and that the thyroid system relies on good lymphatic flow for the correct information. And then it's a whole the two systems that work
But
in
low
concert
thyroid hormones, it
together.
doesn't matter what you do in your lymph, it's not going to run. It literally, the thyroid hormones activate the cells within the lymphatic system to keep it moving. Thyroid hormones keep everything flowing, your gut flowing, your brain flowing, your hormones flowing, and your lymph flowing. So if you're
So
doing
it sounds like, yeah, for
you're
people
doing
who
all
are
of the
using the
things and you're
gloves,
still
they're
feeling
helping.
puffy and you're not getting the result from the gloves, and I use the gloves pretty much every day. I've had the same pair of Chelsey gloves for the last 10 years. When she first brought them out, I still have my same gloves. They've lasted. I think I've lost one of the magnets, but that's okay. I know you can replace them, but
Yeah, we replace them.
brilliant. But if you still are not in symptoms and you feel sluggish, get your thyroid checked out, and make sure you look at the T3, because you're just looking at TSH, T4 and antibodies. Get your antibodies tested too.
Okay. Oh, amazing takeaways. Thank you for being an absolute,
No problem. It's been
really
fun.
bright expert for us. We can't wait to hear what everyone's questions come in after hours when they're all smashing this live. Thank you so much, Tara. We're thrilled.
Okay.
And
No worries.
yes, we
Lovely
can't wait to learn
you.
more. And yeah, looking forward to sharing any details. We'll provide links in our live to how you can get in touch with Tara.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone. See ya. Bye.